So, this lesson will be for The Possibility of Evil by Shirley Jackson. And this story was published in 1965. But Shirley Jackson, if we said she was born in 1916 and died in 1965, we can assume that her family had published a story after her death. So that's something that will happen sometimes. So that's why we would notice the story was published in 1965, and you think it's weird that she died that year, but most likely her family had it published. So now, our first things we would want to identify here, we have Miss Adela Strangeworth stepped out daintily on Main Street on her way to the grocer. So we know here that, you would want to read a little more into the story before you identify narration, but this entire story will be narrated third person because our narrator is not in the town. And we have Miss Strangeworth thought that there was nothing in the world like a fragrant summer day. So this tells us, if I go to my literary chart here, we have third person narrator. The narrator is not in the story, but it's point of view of Miss Strangeworth. So we could say it's a limited point of view. We're only going to have the point of view of Miss Strangeworth, not anyone else in the town. And we know that because it's going to say she thought there was nothing in the world. So that's showing her thoughts and feelings. Now, for our setting here, we can say this would be a small town. We know that she is 71. She's never left the town. And we also know that she lives on Pleasant Street. And we can say here that she's lived there for about 100 years. And another part of our setting is outside her house is these rose bushes that she's been tending to for her entire life. They could say they're very important to her family. So that could also, you could add that to the setting. It's primarily taking place at Miss Strangeworth's house. So you could say the focus of the story is Miss Strangeworth's home, which is described as having a beautiful, well-maintained rose garden in the front, however you'd want to say it. These would just be like notes here. So this would be our setting, focusing on the small town and specifically Miss Strangeworth's house. So now this would be our exposition. Meeting her, the town, how she feels about the town, and how long she's lived there. We also can say she's pretty possessive over her town because she doesn't let anyone that's a tourist take the roses because the roses have to be in the town. She doesn't want them leaving. So they're very symbolic towards her. And now she's going on her day. As far as her interactions with the people in the town, we could say it's a little weird when she tells the grocer he forgot to remind her to get her tea. That's not exactly his job, but he's friendly to her nonetheless. You could say she's kind of demanding of people if you wanted to interpret it that way. And then she's going to come across Helen, and she says they are the two most infatuated young parents she had ever known. So when she says that little girl is going to grow up expecting luxury all her life, she's basically saying that the child is spoiled, which isn't the nicest thing to say, right? Plus, the baby's only 6 months old. And then we know that Helen Crane here is going to confide in Miss Strangeworth. She's going to say, don't you think the child should be sitting up? So we could say that Miss Strangeworth is trusted by her town members because they are, confiding in her. She's going to tell Miss Crane it's nonsense and that nothing is wrong with this baby, right? And then then she goes on, right? So she tells Miss Crane to her face that nothing is wrong. And here we have her asking Billy Moore why he wasn't in his dad's car. She says something to this librarian. When she says, Miss Strangeworth noticed that Miss Chandler had not taken much trouble with her hair this morning inside. Miss Strangeworth hated sloppiness. We could start to say here that Miss Strangeworth is judgmental towards the people in her town. Also, observant. She observes this 15-year-old girl running down the street crying. And then it's assumed that she had a fight with the Harris boy. So this shows her observancy, all right? Or you could also say she's nosy. Now she gets home, and the perfume of roses meant home, and home meant the Strangeworth house. This is adding more. Now, at this point, we can definitely say that the roses, if I go down here, the roses are most definitely symbolic of Miss Strangeworth's. You could say a lot of things, really. They could be symbolic of her perfectionism, her attachment towards her town, her pride in the town. We could also say her entitlement towards the town, to the point of like, you're not letting tourists take roses from this garden because they're going to leave the town. You could even go as far, the roses symbolize feelings of love and attachment towards her town. You could say, the fact she does not let tourists take the roses out of the town could lead to an obsession with her community and, well, basically the community, most definitely the roses, and her community, leading us to think she could be more than just concern. Maybe it's going to go a step further to obsession. So now she comes into her house, and here we have Miss Strangeworth has a locked desk. Now, something else we should know, just the suffix Miss here tells us that she's not married. If she was Mrs. Strangeworth, then she would have been married. But Shirley Jackson makes a point to call her Miss. This tells us that Miss Strangeworth has never been married. So therefore, we might wonder why she's locking her desk in her own house. And then we get the letter, stationary. One says Strangeworth House, and the other is plain. And then we find out why. So she sits down to write a letter, and it's going to say, didn't you ever see an idiot child before? Some people shouldn't have children, should they? All right, so idiot in the mid 1800s, throughout some like the first half-ish of the 1900s, that would have been a doctor, like a medical term for a child that had some type of like intellectual or physical disability. Kind of like how the R word was used. Doctors would have used idiot as like an official diagnosis. You also might have seen school for idiots. That would be like a school for kids that didn't fit into, your typical general education school. So this has more of a serious meaning back then. Obviously, writing a letter even in today's time, have you ever seen an idiot child before, isn't nice, right? But the meaning of the word idiot has more of a medical term back then than it does now. So she writes this letter, and then she says perhaps a follow-up letter to go to Mrs. Harper. So now we know that she's writing the child letter to Don Crane, Helen's husband. And if we remember too, Helen did not tell, earlier she had said, did you tell Don about this? And she says, I haven't mentioned it to him. So this is a secret that Helen had said. She's worried about their child's development, and now Miss Strangeworth is writing it right to him. And she's also has been writing letters to Mrs. Harper, because she said a follow-up one. This would mean she's already written Miss Crane letters. So she literally had a conversation with this lady, totally normal. But then when she gets home, she has these plans to write letters. When she says, have you found out why they're laughing? Or is the wife really the last to know? This is supposed to be a cheating accusation here. So she's accusing Mr. Harper of cheating, and she's writing this letter to Mrs. Harper. And then we find out, we get the title of the story here, okay? So that when she said she had saw the Linda Stewart girl crying, we learn Linda Stewart's parents would have gone unsuspectingly ahead with their lives, never aware of the possibility of evil lurking nearby, if Miss Strangeworth had not sent a letter to open their eyes. And we also find here, she never concerned herself with facts. Her letters all dealt with the more negotiable stuff of suspicion. So all the things that she's saying about the cheating Mr. Crane, and you could say the child as well, because no one is going to really know that, especially not Miss Strangeworth. She's lying. She's making up the possibility of evil. And remember, that's the title of our story, The Possibility of Evil. So this is our significance of the title. Miss Strangeworth is alerting to people in her town that it's possible that people in their lives are evil. But in actuality, she knows that's not true. So we might ask ourselves, who's really the evil one here in the town? And here, there were so many wicked people in the world. And Miss Strangeworth is the only one. There's only one Strangeworth left in town. This could kind of tell us, maybe she is evil. If there's so many wicked people and only one Strangeworth, maybe we could say there's so many people in the town and only one wicked Strangeworth. You could say this is kind of ironic. And then here's the letter she's going to write to a lady who's having a surgery. They're only human and need money like the rest of us. Supposing I've slipped accidentally, would Dr. Burns get his fee and a little extra from that nephew of yours? Here she's implying that this doctor who's about to do a surgery on Mrs. Foster is getting paid by the nephew to kill her on the table. So these letters are also slanderous. Like, you could almost say this would be illegal. And Billy, so when she asked Billy why he wasn't driving the car, we know that she plans to start a rumor with the school board that Billy's dad is doing something illegal, maybe, to have bought this car. And then we find she sends these for the past year, 2 or 3 a day. That's kind of a lot, or no more than 1 a month. So she's been doing this for the last year, which is kind of weird. Why would someone all of a sudden start to do this, right? And so now she has her letters written, and we're almost to the climax. All of this here is still considered the rising action. Her walking around the town getting gossip, her using the gossip and spinning it in sinister rumor ways, and now she's going to head to the post office. Obviously, she does this in a secret way, so people don't know she's doing it. Now, there's kids outside the post office, and specifically, little Linda. And she is crying again, but this time, she's going to say, why? She's saying she was talking to the Harris boy, and she says, I just can't. It's nasty. And then we learn that the Harris boy can't go to Linda's house or hang out with her. And she says, I wouldn't tell you for anything. You've got to have a dirty, dirty mind for things like that. And then all Miss Strangeworth's going to say is, oh, there's so much evil lurking. You can say this part, when she arrives to the post office and Linda's crying, that is most definitely our irony, okay? Because she arrives to send her batch of letters, and when she sees the Harris girl crying, that is literally over her last letter. because Mrs. Strangeworth wrote a letter to this girl's parents. So the girl is crying about the letter written, the lying letter, and as Miss Strangeworth arrives to the post office to send more life-ruining letters. So this would be considered ironic. And it could be especially ironic that Miss Strangeworth doesn't even realize that the aftermath of her letter writing is hurt feelings. Very upset. Linda is obviously upset here. Miss Strangeworth wrote a letter to the parents. We can assume she said they were having relations of some sorts. And then Linda's dad says, no more friendship with the Harris boy. All right, so now here is our climax. The climax is the moment that she drops one of the letters outside of the box. 2 went in, 1 fell on the ground. And she does not hear the Harris boy call her name. So this here is the climactic moment, a point of no return, you could say, for Miss Strangeworth. Because now things will be in motion. So that would be the climax paragraph. Now we get to the falling action. So the Harris boy, he wants to take it to the Crane, to Don Crane. And if Linda would have convinced him otherwise to just put it in the mail slot, then this would have kept continuing. Miss Strangeworth's nasty letters to everyone in the town. But we have the Harris boy say, maybe it's good news for them. Maybe they need something happy tonight too, like us. So you can definitely say it's ironic, another instance of irony, that the Harris boy is going to be the one to deliver the letter to Don Crane. Because once Don Crane gets this letter in his hand, he's probably going to recognize all the other letters that have been being sent to his wife, and maybe even him too. Because she's using the same mystery stationery, but it's still kind of probably recognizable. So, and the fact that it's a weird letter saying something addressed with no return address, right? So we could say it's ironic that the Harris boy delivers the letter himself, considering he's a victim of Miss Strangeworth. And when he says maybe it'll be something happy, it actually ironically is going to be happy for him. Because in the end, Miss Strangeworth's going to wake up in the morning. Oh wait, I thought my thing went off. Miss Strangeworth will wake up in the morning and she gets a letter and it's going to say, look out at what used to be your roses. So here we can assume that Don Crane received the letter from the Harris boy, opened it, and immediately put 2 and 2 together. He would have realized the insulting letter was from her, and he probably also realized all these other letters were as well. And then he went over to her house and destroyed her roses. And from the symbolism, because we might not think that's like the worst thing to do to someone, right? But considering that these roses symbolized her love for the town, her attachment to the townspeople, her pride in her home, kind of like her entitlement, her lawn was perfect. You could say that at this point, the destruction of the rose bushes symbolizes that she's going to be pretty much totally cut out of her town. Her life is not going to be the same. No one's really going to talk to her anymore, we can assume, at least for a really long time. So that would be our ironic ending, that in the end, her love, her most beloved thing, was destroyed by her, what she thought was acts of love. In the end, it ends up being her destruction. And you could also say it's ironic that the Harris boy delivered it because he needed good news. And we can assume that because it's a small town, we can assume that everyone that has gotten a letter sent about them will now be vindicated, because everyone's going to know that all those letters was just delusional lies from Miss Strangeworth. And that would be the literary element device breakdown for the possibility of evil. Also, for the tone, we could say the tone was cautionary in a way, because you have her, Miss Strangeworth, she really was doing all this because she was so concerned or paranoid that there was evil in the town. And she was always her observancy could also make it have a cautious tone. Or you could just say it was a peculiar, mysterious tone. Because as the story starts, we definitely want to wonder, why is this lady called Miss Strangeworth? The name Miss Strangeworth in general kind of builds the tone. Because when an author picks like a weird type of name like that for a character, you can assume they did it on purpose. So throughout the story, we're wondering what is going to be so strange about her. We would also be wondering from the title, the possibility of evil. Throughout basically the first 2 or 3 pages, we're wondering, where's the evil? And then we get our answer. So that would be the tone. You could say peculiar, mysterious, strange. You could say strange because this is a weird thing she's doing, right? So the tone is just the feeling that this author would have had. For our characterization, you could say a lot of things about her. Paranoid, delusional. You could even say, like, you could go as far as to say she's being mean. But in her mind, she doesn't think she is. So, but the letters she sends most definitely hurt people's feelings. And she really has no empathy in a way. You could say she lacks empathy. Even though she's pretending she cares, it's obvious that she doesn't, especially when she sees the Harris girl crying so bad. So this would be our Shirley Jackson, The Possibility of Evil, literary element breakdown.